We're glad everyone is here today. Welcome to the Yoga for People in Pain webinar. This is a 5-part series that is co-sponsored by Pain BC, who we're very glad to be working with on this. The series includes today's webinar on research behind yoga as a treatment option for chronic pain, as well as 4 exercise videos and 4 live Q&A webinars that will be coming over the next 4 weeks. We're glad you're here today. My name is Tanya Hyde, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. I'm the project manager with the Canadian Institute for the Relief of Pain and Disability, and this webinar is co-sponsored by ourselves as well as Pain BC, and we also worked in collaboration with the Canadian Pain Coalition. The webinar is also made possible by the support of a direct access program through the BC government. And as I mentioned, my name is Tanya, and I'll be moderating and helping with handling the Q&A session at the end. And Lisa Mighton is CIRPD's education coordinator, and she'll be helping moderate the questions. And our presenter today is Neil Pearson. Neil is a clinical assistant professor at UBC and the first physical therapist to ever win the Excellence in Interprofessional Pain Education Award from the Canadian Pain Society. He's a board member of Pain BC, a founding chair of the Canadian Physiotherapy Pain Science Division, a physiotherapist, yoga therapist, and creator of Pain Care Yoga certification. Neil works clinically exclusively with people in pain. He teaches healthcare professionals and yoga therapists throughout Canada and the USA, taking every opportunity to integrate their training with our most insightful teachers, those living in pain. And we're very glad to have him with us today. So Neil, if you want to go ahead with your presentation.
Thank you so much, Tanya. It's great to be here. I'm sitting at my home in Penticton. It looks like our snowstorm has just finished. So I'm awful glad that we have the internet to do this, because I wouldn't have been getting very far this morning. Anyway, so what I want to do today is tell you more about yoga and how it can be integrated to help people who have chronic pain conditions. So this is the basic outline we're going to go through. Is just talking a little bit about yoga. This will be interspersed all the way through the talk today. There's so much misunderstanding about yoga and so many ideas about yoga that I'd like to try to shift to get people to understand it a little bit better. I also want to talk about research, the research that we have that suggests that yoga could be beneficial for people in pain, and then talk about how we can integrate these two factors. Near the end, we'll be talking about how we can use yoga more successfully, because some people have tried yoga and it hasn't worked, just like we've often tried exercise and it hasn't worked. Then we'll talk briefly about the practice videos that we'll get to, and then some question and answer time. We're hoping for 5 or 10 minutes at the end. Anyway, what I'd like to do is start off by pointing out that in terms of pain management, I do not think that yoga is the only answer for pain management, just to make everyone clear on that to start with. I think yoga can be really helpful. For some people, yoga is actually the only thing that they need. I've met some people and they've surprised me that they've said, I've had this chronic pain condition, and I've tried these other things, they didn't work, and I tried yoga, and that was the answer that I got. I didn't need to use medication or anything else, which always surprises me, because I think the most likely probability, or the highest probability, is that if yoga helps, most people are going to find that it's one of the things that we do to try to help with pain management. Pain being such a multi-dimensional issue, that's the possibility of one intervention or one strategy being able to solve it is just less likely. So what is yoga? Yoga is so many different things. People talk about how yoga has a history of up to 4,000 years. Apparently there's some evidence that 4,000 years ago yoga was already in existence. I think the yoga that we have today is very much different than what it would have been back then. Over the years, yoga was, for quite a while, was a discipline, almost like a martial art in some ways, where young boys would learn this discipline to become disciplined in their body, mind, and spirit. If we look at the word yoga and say, well, what's that word mean? Well, actually, if you translate it fairly literally, it means to yoke. Yoking would be like joining or connecting. And so people often talk about yoga poetically and saying is that yoga helps you connect to what's really important in life or what's important inside you. In terms of chronic pain, yoga may be helpful from this perspective in terms of helping us reconnect. Because as if you've got chronic pain, you know that the pain disconnects us from so many things in our life. Somewhat of a joke that people often will say is that pain is a lot like the worst country western song out there. You end up losing everything when you're in pain. And so with all the things that we become disconnected from or lose when we have pain, yoga is one way that we can help to reconnect. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the specifics of that as we go along. But I wanted to jump right into the research because that's a thing that people want to know. Before we get to the research around yoga, I wanted to sort of break yoga up into sort of two parts. There's the physical exercise part of yoga, and then there's also the meditation relaxation part. So if you look at the research around these things, every research study that's out there and all of the big research analyses that are done say that exercise and activity resumption, getting back to moving again, are beneficial for people in pain. Now, I'm sure there's some people who hear that and say, well, that's not true because I've tried it and it didn't work for me. And I think that's the key thing here is that even though there's a lot of support for using exercise and activity as a pain care strategy, it doesn't mean that just getting more active is all that we need to do. And that's probably why there's so many people interested in hearing this webinar series, is because we've tried to move in the face of pain and it hasn't been successful. And hopefully we can give you some guidance in the yoga world around that. So if we look outside the physical activity side and look at the meditation side, sorry, excuse me, there's a lot of different research out there around meditation. The one that has the most research is mindfulness meditation, which I decided to talk about here because mindfulness meditation is very similar to the kind of meditation that we do in yoga. It's not exactly the same, but it's quite similar. If we look at this research, there's very good studies have been done looking at benefits for people with chronic low back pain, fibromyalgia, rheumatoid arthritis, many different chronic pain conditions. If you practice mindfulness meditation for a period of time, that you start to get decreases in pain and improvements in function. They also have found that people find they're able to cope with their pain more. So if you don't get less pain, what people often will report is that they actually can cope with the pain that they have in better ways. They also found from this research that mindfulness meditation will help decrease both depression and anxiety, which is really key around the chronic pain area, of course, because if you have chronic pain long enough and bad enough, you will develop depression and or anxiety. So to go on further with this research, what they found around the meditation side is that when you meditate long enough, when you've got enough practice, that what people report is that they find that they can attend to what they want to attend to more. As chronic pain sort of demands your attention, it makes it hard for us to focus on anything but the pain. Whereas meditation helps us to be able to attend to what we want to attend to. People report being able to become more aware of what's happening in the body when they meditate, and there's a greater ability to find acceptance around the pain. And also key to understand around the word acceptance. Acceptance isn't about giving up. Acceptance is about trying to find a way to somehow be okay with the pain that we have and still hold the desire to move forward. The research around meditation has also shown that, once again, that there's decreased stress, depression, anxiety, and improved cognition, so improved ability to think. And the psychological functioning improvements they found is that people cope better with stress and emotional turmoil. It's because this kind of meditation is easier to research than things like yoga and exercise, because you can get people to sit still doing it. They've been able to do this and look at so what's, when people find these changes, what's happening. Well, some of the brain research has shown that with mindfulness meditation, that when people are doing this kind of meditation and you apply a painful stimulus to them, what you can see is that there's lots of different parts of the brain that's become engaged when any of us have a painful stimulus. But if you're practicing mindful meditation, the way the brain responds is different. And so that people will say, well, yes, I could feel that it hurt, but it really didn't bother me as much. Or, yes, I could feel it hurt, but it didn't hurt anywhere near as much as it was, as much as the pain was when I wasn't meditating. A very recent study, the second bullet on here about decreasing neurogenic inflammation, really recent study that's pretty exciting is they actually looked at this idea that when we have pain persisting and in some painful conditions, the nerves themselves actually start to create inflammation. So that's what neurogenic inflammation is. It's the inflammation, the chemical process is actually being created somewhat by the nerve cells themselves. And what they found was that when people were practicing mindful meditation, that there was less of this happening, which starts to give us some idea that maybe this might be, the meditation techniques might be helpful for people who have things like post-herpetic neuralgia. So if they've had shingles and they have a neuralgia problem from it, or people who have complex regional pain syndrome where we know there's an inflammatory process, that there's actually some evidence now that says this might be why meditation could help in those conditions. The other really key thing that they found in this research is that not only does the meditation practice help you while you're meditating, but they're starting to be able to show that, well, actually, they're starting to show what people have said is that when I meditate, I find improvements, but if I do it long enough, I start to find those same improvements last even when I'm not in a meditative state. So that their pain management that they get while they're meditating starts to expand into more of their life. Now, part of the reason I wanted to talk to you about the meditation and the movement research was that yoga allows us to do this. It allows us to actually do mindful movement, to move mindfully or move in somewhat of a meditative state. We don't have the research to support that you get the same benefits from yoga as from mindful meditation, but I'm guessing from what people tell me that there will be similar benefits anyway. So if we then go on to looking at the research around yoga, well, the American Pain Society came out with this statement, I think it's 2 years ago now. They said that clinicians, so healthcare clinicians, should consider offering yoga to patients with chronic low back pain because of what the research said. The Canadian Pain Society hasn't made any similar statement, and we always have to remember that sometimes you get pain societies saying things like this and being influenced by charismatic people within their association rather than the research itself. But the nice thing is the research is starting to show this, definitely around chronic low back pain, that yoga is a really good technique to do. So there was, just this last year, in 2012, there was a meta-analysis, which is a review of all the research that's out there looking at yoga and chronic pain conditions. And they came up with this statement saying that there's evidence that yoga may be useful for several pain-associated disorders and even short-term practice. So what they did was they looked at all the research that was out there, and they found that there are good research studies on for people with low back pain, irritable bowel syndrome, fibromyalgia, chronic neck pain, carpal tunnel syndrome, knee osteoarthritis, and also one recent one as well looking at the pain that people have after a knee replacement. And they're showing that, or what they've looked at the research and said is that, well, when we look at all the research, this really shows that yoga is beneficial for pain conditions, for many, many pain conditions. They're not saying why. They haven't got to that research yet. And the other thing that they haven't been able to do really well yet is say who it doesn't work for. And that really shows up when we look at this other meta-analysis in 2012. This one looked at yoga and low back pain, so only chronic low back pain this time, whereas the other one was looking at all pain. They state this at the end: there's strong evidence for short-term effectiveness and moderate evidence for long-term effectiveness of yoga for chronic low back pain. And it's key to understand that there aren't a lot of treatments out there that actually would have this same finding when they look at the research. A lot of the interventions that we do come out with when they do these meta-analyses, come out saying there's not a lot of good evidence in support of them yet. Now, in terms of the limitations, the point you see in blue here, the vast majority of the studies that have been done so far with people who have chronic back pain have been done on people who have their average age is in their 40s. They're typically female people in the studies. The people in the studies are typically people who are gainfully employed, so they are working at the time. So the research that they've done, the vast majority of the research has been done on people who we say probably fit into the mild to moderate severity of pain. There's only one study so far that's been done on people with the more moderate to severe pain, people who the vast majority of them were out of work because of complex chronic pain problems. Now, it did show similar results, but we only have one study from there. Most of the other studies are done from people who are still quite functional even in the face of their pain. So the techniques we practiced in yoga, when we actually are practicing yoga, can help to reconnect us with things like being able to breathe calmly. And I think we wouldn't get a whole lot of people arguing that being able to breathe calmly is not a really good thing to do. We know that in pain there's a lot of stress, and that the stress creates more pain. In yoga we can practice techniques to help us to calm that stress, both while we're at rest and while we're trying to move. We know that yoga can help us to, if we do it the right way, to help us to be able to move our body with greater ease. And we know that yoga can help us with this finding a sense of peacefulness, which of course pain makes it so hard for us to find, to get any relief, to get any comfort. And there are aspects of yoga that do that. So that's part of the reason why I think we're going to find that it's helpful. Just quickly to go over the common aspects of pain conditions. If you're a person in pain, you know all these things, but I point them out because you see more of how yoga could be helpful here. So when we have chronic pain conditions, we tend to breathe more shallowly, rapidly. We tend to breathe in our upper chest. Yoga will allow us to get away from breathing in that way by breathing in other patterns. In chronic pain conditions, we tend to have tight, tense muscles. In yoga, we can help to work on relaxing them, be able to feel the muscles that are tight. So it's beneficial there. In chronic pain conditions, we know that some muscles are inhibited or some muscles are weak, and the yoga postures, once again, will be able to help it, being able to, once again, get those muscles to work better, to be able to feel them and get them to work better. We know that in chronic pain conditions there are overly sensitive protective responses, so your body has become, or your nervous system has become hypervigilant, and in yoga we can practice techniques that will help to calm these the stress systems and the protective responses. Pain tends to change how we move, the automatic movement patterns, and so in yoga we can actually practice moving in new patterns, or maybe the old way we used to move. And we know that pain tends to make it hard to feel your body. The area of pain, or sorry, the area of your body where you have pain, we often have a hard time feeling it. And there are many practices in yoga that allow us to spend time, or just give us the opportunities to spend time trying to actually feel our body again, trying to get our brain to pay attention to our body rather than only paying attention to the pain sensations. Now, this last point I have here is that pain is an adverse effect of movement. This is something that one of my physiotherapy colleagues presented to me, and at first I was pretty resistant to it, but I think it's the reality for most people who have chronic pain, is if you have pain and you try to move, you are going to get more pain at first. And what we need to do is find a way around that, or find a way so that that increase in pain isn't so bad at first. And that's where I'm hoping that the videos that we can practice the techniques on the videos will help us get around this. And certainly we should expect that anytime we do new movement, there will be some pain. But the idea here is to try to do the new movement, to do the yoga movements without making the pain scream, because that's really not going to help all that well in the end. Some other things, other problems of pain conditions, feelings of hopelessness, feeling a sense of loss of control. Yoga allows us to see that maybe there is some hope to this. If we can start to see that we can move without making the pain get really bad, then that will improve our sense of control and hope. When we have chronic pain conditions, we tend to feel our body is fragile, so moving our body in the right way can help to make it feel strong and supported again. Pain makes it hard for us to quiet our mind, and that's a big part of the techniques of yoga, is to try to get all that those crazy thoughts. In Buddhism, they sometimes call it monkey mind, where your brain is your mind is jumping like a monkey from branch to branch to branch. It's hard to keep it quiet. Yoga allows us that quietness and peacefulness to try to work on calming this. We all know when we have chronic pain, it's hard to focus. Techniques in yoga actually work on teaching us to practice focusing on what we want to focus on. It's hard to learn new things when we have chronic pain. Techniques like yoga allow us to practice the same things over and over again, which of course will help us to learn these things in the end. We know that pain disrupts sleep. Well, yoga isn't exactly going to jump to making you sleep better, but if we can calm your nervous system down while you're practicing yoga, and that starts to sort of invade the rest of your life, so your nervous system becomes more calm all the time, then it will definitely help with sleep and less pain. Pain changes our emotions, it changes our thoughts, and it gives us this sense of isolation. Yoga, like any group exercise, can help us feel like we're part of a group again, part of a community, which is so important for many of us as we try to get better. And most of us feel that there's no rest from the pain, and that's where meditation and some of the relaxation techniques of yoga can be so helpful, because they give us an opportunity to try to find a sense of peacefulness, to get a bit of a break. So we think that yoga techniques can help with so many of these things that happen to us when we have chronic pain. Now, people always ask this question of me, well, what kind of yoga should I do? And usually when people are asking the question, they're asking what style, because there's lots of different styles of yoga now. Most of the styles of yoga in North America, in Western society now, focus on different ways to practice the postures of yoga, although there's much more to yoga than just postures. Down at the bottom of the slide, I've given you some of the key names. These are the ones that people have, some of them they've done research on. The Iyengar system, Vini Yoga, Yin Yoga. There have been research studies specifically done using those yoga styles and shown them to be beneficial. Restorative yoga is another kind of yoga that can help. Ashtanga yoga and Bikram yoga would be yoga styles that I would normally have said to people that I don't think they're the best style to take, because they're much more gymnastic, energetic. But just like anything out there, I've met people who have really quite severe pain conditions, who really had a lot of pain and big physical disability, who tried these styles of yoga and they worked better than the more gentle ones. So I can't tell you what's the best one to do, although my bias would be to go to the more controlled ones like Iyengar yoga, Yin, Vini yoga, restorative yoga. I think these would be the better ones to start with for most people. So get back to yoga, a little bit more about it. In traditional yoga, there are actually 8 aspects of it. The first aspect of the yoga, the word yamas is the Sanskrit word, but this is the first aspect of yoga is actually starting to pay attention to how we act in the world, things like kindness. And then the second aspect of yoga is actually, they're called the niyamas, and that's how we treat ourselves. So this is looking at things like contentment and keeping things simple. So these are actually aspects of yoga that we typically learn while we're practicing yoga, and the teachers help us out with. The aspect of yoga that most people know the most about are the postures of yoga, which we'll get into talking a little bit more. And then there's the pranayama, which is the breathing techniques. The breathing, the meditation, relaxation techniques are sort of all wrapped up around the pranayama. Then there's another aspect of yoga that a lot of people haven't heard of. It really gets translated into withdrawing the senses. The idea is to stop paying attention to what's happening outside and bring your awareness inside, which hopefully you can understand is somewhat of a body awareness technique and a relaxation and meditation technique. Then the other next two aspects of yoga have to do with concentration and meditation, actual practices of those. And there's also the last part of yoga is when we sort of get to where we want to get. It's translated as enlightenment. But this is getting to a place of peacefulness, which the yogis would have said that lots of us may not get to in this life. When you look at this slide, I hope that you can see that yoga isn't just about the postures. Yoga is about a lot. It's about a sort of discipline, a bigger. It's bigger than just physical exercise, and we believe, and once again we don't know for sure, but we believe that because yoga integrates meditation and mindfulness and relaxation, and considering how we act in the world and how we treat ourselves, that putting that all together into this one system will actually allow even better benefits for people who have chronic pain. So far we only have one study that compared, if we look at yoga practice comparing to a physical exercise practice where they used walking in this one, and everything else was the same in these two things, and they found that there were better changes in the nervous system, in some of the chemistry of the nervous system that would lead to less pain and a more calm mood and more optimism when people did the yoga. But so far we only have that one study to guide us here. Now just a little bit more about yoga. In terms of traditionally, there were actually four big paths of yoga. There was the classic or traditional yoga. Then there was a yoga called bhakti yoga, which had to do with devotion. Another one that had to do with karma or service to others. Another one had to do with knowledge. And originally the people who taught yoga, long before it came to North America, believed that we could get the same results whether we did the traditional path of yoga or if we chose any of these other three results. And really what they're saying is that there's lots of different paths. There's not one path that fits everyone. And I'm always amazed that when I see sometimes people get better in paths that you would never expect. And I think the yogis were sort of onto that. Now to jump from yoga into Western pain management, if we look at the research around it, it definitely says that the most effective way to help people who have chronic pain is to help people with interdisciplinary pain management programs. And that when we get people into these programs, there's less pain, better function, better quality of life. Big issues around this is because these are hugely expensive programs, and we tend to only send the people who are most complex there. But on the positive side, these programs, what they've done is they've integrated body techniques, the physical exercise techniques, with psychology. So what they've really done is looked at a body-mind approach. And I think that's because they found it so effective there, we could sort of say, well, maybe once again that's why yoga could be effective, and maybe if yoga does provide another body-mind intervention, this is something actually could be way less expensive than an interdisciplinary pain management program. Often these programs can cost over $10,000 when people go to them, which is, of course, something that only insurance companies are typically going to pay for. So within Western pain management, there's a role for medications, for pain-relieving modalities like IMS and acupuncture and heat and things like that. And there's also roles for counseling. And one thing I really want to point out is that as much as those things are important within Western pain management, I think for the vast majority of people who have chronic pain and might use yoga, they still want to use these things the right way, and to use these things like medication and pain-relieving modalities and counseling as ways to deal with the complexity of chronic pain, while at the same time, by doing those things and by practicing yoga, you get to the answer that we think that works best. For most people, the answer that helps with the pain the best is when we find the way to do the things for ourselves to get better. That typically and unfortunately, that when we first have chronic pain, what most people tend to do is get us to just do something. People will give us medication, or they'll do a treatment to us, and these things seem to be able to help in the short term, but they don't seem to help in the long term. The long-term answer typically is that when we use the benefits of Western pain management in combination with finding our own path of how do we start to move again in some sort of way to make movement more easy, and how do we find a way to start to live again? Those are the long-term answers. And that's definitely shown to be, when we look at the research around Western pain management, it's been shown to be the key. And for those of you who heard me before, you've heard me say that it's so unfortunate that really in the end, the most effective intervention that the research has said around Western pain management is this sort of pain self-management and activity process. And it's really unfortunate that it's often the last thing that anyone gets recommended, by which time, of course, the pain has changed things a lot. And the thing that pain changes a lot, more than anything in our bodies, is it changes the way our nervous systems work. It changes the way the fight, flight, freeze responses work. So these tend to be quite agitated. Our systems are in fight, or they're in flight. And one of the things that I really like thinking about this is that when we do yoga, if yoga is going to be successful for you, you absolutely need to have some fight in you to make it work. But if you fight too much, yeah, it seems like it just gets the fight system, the fight-flight system, to be even more cranked up. The same thing with the flight side of things. If every time you have an increase in pain, you run away from the pain, if that's the way that we approach things, we won't get better. So we need to find a way to, if we're going to practice yoga or any exercise routine, how do we find a way to know when it's best to back away, but not run away too much? And how do we know how much to fight but not too much? Really, the only answer is practice, by doing it over and over and over again, to try to find out how our unique individual system will work around these things. We know pain definitely interrupts with the relaxation responses. It makes it really hard to relax. We know that pain will change the sensory and perceptual system. So in a lot of people with pain, our body awareness and our body image gets changed. Our ability to perceive where our body is and what position it's in gets altered. We know that the nervous systems that relate to moving our body and our muscles get changed. And we know the nervous systems related to thinking and to feeling get changed. And so we know all these things happen. And then when we go to yoga, we say, well, once again, we can actually do things to try to address each of these aspects of our nervous systems through yoga classes. And I think in the end, we can say, well, we can create yoga classes for people with pain, and we can create individualized yoga routines that specifically address these things that happen within our nervous system. And I point this out because most people would say, okay, well, if I have chronic low back pain, I want to do the yoga that's right for my low back. Or if I have neck pain, do it for my neck. Whereas I think that we can look at it a bit of a different way. We can say as well, if I have a chronic pain problem, my nervous systems have been changed. So how can I do a yoga routine or do yoga techniques that would actually help to change my nervous systems back to a less agitated state? Hopefully you're getting the idea so far that I'm trying to tell you that yoga isn't just about postures. Yoga has postures in it, but it's not just about postures. And I think it's important to understand that the specific postures you practice in yoga may not be the most important part. They may not be the thing that is most helpful for you. It may be more about how you practice. And I've experienced this before with people who have told me, well, I've tried yoga since I've had chronic pain and it doesn't work. And then what we do is we don't change the postures that the person was doing, but just change how they were doing it. And sometimes it can be more effective just because of that. But at the same time that the postures may not be the most important thing to you, it turns out that the postures could be. It could be that for your particular situation that the postures are definitely really, really important. Or maybe they're just important for some aspects. So for example, if the pain has really affected your balance, then we can do balancing postures in yoga to help with that. If the pain has really made it hard for you to let muscles go, or you just have the sense that you're always on guard and you can't let go, well, there are actually postures within yoga that will help you work specifically on things like that. And we can see that some of the postures in yoga can be used as a metaphor. the one that always springs to mind for me is if you're if you could sit down on the floor with your legs extended and you bent out towards your to try to touch your toes, no matter how far you're going. To be able to do this movement, what you have to do is you're reaching forward at the same time as you've got to let the muscles of your back and your hips and the back of your legs let go. So at the same time as you're trying to reach forward, you're needing to let go. And so you can sort of play around with this as a metaphor while you're doing it, because a lot of us have a hard time when we're trying to move forward to do new things. It's hard to let go because new things, we never know what's going to happen when you're doing new things, and so that makes it, our body just holds on. So I'm not going to be able to go through all the metaphors of yoga postures with you, but hopefully if you find good teachers, you can get them to help you out with that related to your issues. To increase success in the face of ongoing pain and a sensitized nervous system, what we need to do is practice. And often what we need to do is practice things before we start to do movement. And those are the things that we're going to be doing. The first 3 of the webinars, practice webinars, we're going to be looking at practicing breath awareness, then secondly breath control, and then thirdly more body awareness. And for a lot of people, practicing those things will make it so that you actually can start to do the postures of yoga without worsening the pain. Now this slide is just to show you some things that I'm sure you recognize won't help. If you hold your breath, if you breathe shallowly, if you tighten everything up, if you ignore your pain, if you push so hard that you know you're going to pay for it later, if you ignore your body while you're doing it, if you try to do yoga or any exercise at the same time as you're thinking about things that make you angry or scared or that make you feel really sad, these kinds of things become important for us to not do while we're trying to get better from chronic pain, because the pain has become so complex that if we practice with our body tense, if we practice holding our breath, if we practice pushing really hard and ignoring our body, these things typically don't work. So what I want to do is hopefully optimize your success with using yoga, but hopefully you'll be able to see as you go along with this is that you could use these same techniques for any exercise routine, whether it's Pilates or Tai Chi or Qigong or a stretching routine or a gentle weight routine. Any of these things will work. Now, people will want to know, how much do I practice? Well, we don't have a great answer for this. I wish I could tell you that there was, but the best evidence around how much practice is necessary, if we look at the yoga research, it says that practicing as little as once a week can lead to significant changes in people's reports of their pain, in how disabled the pain is making them, in how well they're coping with the pain. Whereas if we look at the research from neurophysiology being the functioning of the nervous system, the researchers in this area would say that if you want to change the way the nervous system is working, you probably need to practice 60 to 90 minutes a day for 4 to 6 weeks. So you can see there's a huge discrepancy here between how much the yoga research says you really don't have to practice much at all, like 75 to 90 minutes once a week seems to be enough to get changes in 4 or 6 weeks, whereas in the more Western research on the neuroscience says that you need to do it longer. So we don't know. My recommendation to people is to do it as much as you can, up to the 60 to 90 minutes a day, every day. I think the more you do it, the better you're going to get, or the faster you're going to be able to see change, as long as you're doing it wisely. Now, if you say, you know, I've got this pain is so bad and it's been affecting me for so long that if I concentrate for 20 minutes, if I try, for 20 minutes to concentrate on doing this, it's going to make me so much worse. I'm not going to be able to function at all if I do that. Then I would say to you is do what you know will not disrupt things too much. Do something that's going to be challenging, but you know that you're not going to pay a negative price for it all the time. So this research is saying 60 to 90 minutes a day. We'll start with what you can do. It would be the same as if you said, that Participation says I should be walking 30 minutes a day, and the best I can do is go walking for 2. If I walk for 2, I know I'm all right. We'll start there. Start with something small. Now, the nice thing about the practices that you're going to learn in with the webinars is that they don't take a lot of physical energy, at least for the first 3. And even the 4th one that we'll start to look at using breath awareness, breath control, and body awareness while you start to do some movement. The movements we're going to be looking at will be quite gentle. I know there were some people concerned about, would these yoga postures be ones that you have to lay down on the floor for, or do you have to stand up a lot? I'm going to try to show you some simple yoga postures that everyone will be able to do some of them. There may be some that you can't do, but you'll be able to do some of them, and that they'll be finding some success in them will hopefully allow you to move forward better. So we're going to start with these 4 videos. As Tanya said, the first one on breath awareness is going to be posted later on today. It's going to give you about 10 minutes or so of instruction and guidance, and what you can do is just keep on listening to it over and over to practice this breath awareness technique. If you find that you don't need to listen to it, you can do it without it after you've learned it, then go ahead and just practice it that way. And what I'm hoping that you'll be able to do is try practicing this each day, and that when we get together again next Friday, you'll be able to discuss things like what's gotten in your way of doing it, what did you try, what worked for you, and also what didn't work for you, and maybe if something didn't work for you and you found a way around it. I'm hoping that the webinar, the Q&A on Friday will be as much about me providing you with what I've learned from other people in pain as it will be for you to share what worked for you and what didn't work for you with others, so that we can all learn, because really the greatest teachers in this area, at least for me so far, really have been the people I've worked with who've taught me so many things that don't work and do work. Obviously the researchers and all my other mentors have helped a lot as well, but definitely it's listening to what works for the people who are trying it is really, really important. The research is way behind what we can learn from our patients so far. So I'm going to leave it at that. I could talk a lot about this, but leave it at that for now, and move into questions.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And I think I'll hand it over to Lisa, as she's been monitoring some of the questions. But also, if you have questions now, feel free to type them into the questions box area, and we'll try and address as many as we can before the end of the webinar, so about 14 minutes. So if you want to go ahead, Lisa, and take over.
Okay, one of the questions you talked about, the research about yoga and how long is long enough to see some improvement. One of the questions is about meditation and how long is long enough. Have you seen anything about that?
Lisa, do you know, is the question more about when the individual practice, like should I practice 5 or 10 or 15 minutes, or more is it over how many weeks?
Perhaps both.
Okay. Actually, yeah, it's probably simple to answer both. The research the research has been done, they're looking at when people actually doing the meditation techniques, and I've seen ones that go down as short as 15 minutes of meditation. And the 2 that I saw actually came out of Ontario. If I remember them correctly now, they were looking at some of the immune system cells, and that even as little as meditation technique for 15 minutes a day, and I think they just did in that study a week or 2. It was quite short. They found that people's immune system started to change, so actually be bolstered by just doing it that short. So the research is showing that even short periods of time, 10, 15 minutes at a time for even 1 or 2 weeks can be beneficial. There was recently a new study on yoga where they actually looked at people who were practicing yoga. Now they were doing it, I think it was around 2 hours a day, but they just did it for 7 days in a row. And the improvements they found in a whole lot of physiological markers like stress hormones was pretty amazing. So I guess the point would be any practice seems to be worthwhile. the biggest question we have to figure out for ourselves is how much do we have to practice down the road? So I would say the research says do whatever you can to start, but we don't know the dose that we need to maintain it down the road, and I think that's probably going to be individual.
Okay, there's a couple of questions about osteoporosis. One about osteoporosis, someone with osteoporosis fractures, and wondering about the safety of yoga movements. And another one that they've heard that people with osteoporosis should avoid bending forward. And have you heard anything about that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, yeah, I guess the reality is if you have osteoporosis, if you're going to do yoga, I would highly recommend that you see either a yoga therapist who knows osteoporosis or a physical therapist or someone who can do a good health examination on you first to be able to provide you with the right instructions of what you should do and what you should avoid. Forward bending puts a lot of stress on the vertebrae of our back, and if osteoporosis is bad, it could actually cause a fracture. Even if your osteoporosis is bad enough, even laying on your stomach in yoga can be bad because the pressure of your body weight on your rib cage. I've actually had, because I have a number of a number of students in my therapeutic yoga class who have been doing yoga for a long time and have developed osteoporosis. One of them actually sustained a rib fracture in class laying on her stomach. So there are forward bending, twisting, anything that puts a lot of pressure on the base of the neck, like some of those yoga postures. Really, you need very specific guidance around those with osteoporosis. Even if you have osteopenia, which is so there's sort of thinning of the bone, but it's not made it all the way into the osteoporosis side. I think anyone who has those really should be getting, before they go into a yoga practice, they really should be seeing a physical therapist or someone who really understands the person's health situation and yoga and osteoporosis to give them good guidance. Just one other thing I want to mention about that is a couple of years ago I was actually teaching a bunch of yoga therapists about osteoporosis and what things to avoid, and we were talking about not doing this one particular yoga posture where you lay on your back and you actually throw your legs over, you don't really throw them, but you position them back over your body, so you're sort of in this crunched up position with your neck. And we're saying, this is obviously a thing you would never want to do with osteoporosis. And the day after, someone brought in a picture from a newspaper down in North Carolina that showed a woman who is in her 80s, who is a yoga teacher, and she's got this big smile on her face in this posture, and she's talking about how she she has osteoporosis, and she teaches yoga for people with osteoporosis. So my point of bringing that up to you is that it doesn't mean you should never, ever, ever do these things. It means you need to do them wisely. Now, I don't know if that lady was doing it wisely, but it doesn't mean that you should never forward bend again. But it would mean that you definitely wouldn't want to push it. You'd want to get the right advice from someone who knows you, but you do not want to push forward bends, even though you're going to have to do some.
Okay, there's a few questions about safety and specific injuries or restrictions. For example, a couple of people with hip replacements asking, is yoga safe for me? So maybe you could talk a bit about that. Is yoga and safety around specific conditions?
Yeah. Well, I think that it's a really, really good question. In that once again, I think what you really need to do is, if you have conditions like that, you need to see someone who understands yoga and someone who understands your specific condition. In terms of total hip replacements, what you can or can't do after it is somewhat going to be related to how the surgeon ended up having to do the replacement. And so the best person usually to know those things would be the physical therapist who's in contact with the surgeon. One trouble that we get into is that just because maybe you're not supposed to do full forward bending, or maybe you're not supposed to do a sort of hip abduction movement after this, That doesn't mean you can't do yoga. It just means that when that posture came up in class, you just wouldn't want to do it, or you'd want to modify it in a big way. And that's the trouble is that yoga postures can cause injury, and at the same time as yoga postures can be really good, just like any exercise. And so if you have those conditions, unfortunately I can't tell you over the internet exactly what you should or shouldn't do. This is where you need to find experts who know enough about yoga and know enough about your physical status to be able to give you the right guidance.
Okay, you talk a bit about sort of qualified yoga instructors, and a few people are asking, how can I find a qualified yoga instructor?
Wow. Yeah, it's a hard thing to answer. I think if you could find someone who's been through one of the certified yoga therapy training, I think you can be pretty much assured that that person typically has the highest knowledge. But then you'll find people who've got they've got a qualification that says they're certified with the Yoga Alliance, which means that they've gone through a yoga training. That training might be 200 hours of training, it might be 500 hours. They would be considered to be qualified, but are they qualified to be able to help you with a therapeutic condition? I just can't tell you. I think what you need to do is you need to be a good consumer, is you need to go to the person who's going to be the yoga teacher and say, this is what's going on with me, and you know, convince me that you're the person who can sort of help me out with this. And one other thing I want to make sure I point out on this is that there are a whole lot of people who've been teaching yoga for a long time who have no certification after their name who are excellent. It's the kind of thing where, you know, traditionally there was no certification in it. It's only been recently that we've been demanding people get it, mainly because there were people running around really teaching yoga in an unsafe way. So in the end, how do you know? You got to go and interview the teacher to really know for sure.
Are there any modifications for yoga? Some people with chronic pain or arthritis find that there's yoga positions, there's so much weight on the hands and the arms.
Yeah, because of some conditions, if you the weight bearing, it could be even through the feet and the ankles if the arthritis has affected those areas of the body. I think really in the end, what we need to do is follow a guideline that says that if you can do the posture, and while you're doing the posture you can breathe calmly, you can keep your breath calm and your body calm and your mind calm while you're doing the posture, it's probably a safe thing to do. But if you find that you're trying to do it and you can't keep calm while you're doing it, then it's time to say, all right, I need to modify it. And then in terms of how do you modify these things? Well, it's so individual. I mean, so I have people who cannot take force through their wrists, so they just do not do any of the yoga postures where they have to take force through the wrists. So commonly in yoga there's things called sun salutations, and for people who have rheumatoid arthritis in their hands and wrists, this is probably not the yoga that they should be doing. So the modifications can be do less of it. The modification could be modify how you're doing it so there's less force in that posture on your body. The modification could be do a different position. So if you're wanting to do cat-cow on your hands and knees, we like those movements of your spine, well, we can find a way to do those in standing and in sitting as well. But it gets so individual that it's hard to be able to tell anyone, as I said, across the internet how to modify it exactly.
There's a few questions about hot yoga. Is there any evidence about that, and do you have any sort of personal thoughts on it?
I have not seen any specific randomized controlled trials. So the research that we think is good, well done, I mean, on the hot yoga styles. In terms of the my personal opinion, I think it varies. If you really like heat, I can see how that could be really, really helpful to people. Some of the hot yoga studios, though, are the yoga they're teaching is very energetic. Sometimes the studios are really, really hot, and so if you don't like heat, it's not a great place to be. The other thing about the heat that creates is sweat, so if you're worried about balance and slipping, that's not a great place to be in those hot yoga studios. But the heat can be relaxing to people, but often the hot yoga studios have energetic, athletic yoga practices, which, as I said, I would have guessed that it wouldn't really work for most people with chronic pain, although I have met some people that it worked for. So yeah, I'll leave it at that for hot yoga.
Okay, there's a couple of questions who want to hear more about, you've used the phrase running away from pain, and they wanting to know, what does running away from pain mean? Does it mean just referring to use of opiates, or?
Oh, actually, yeah, great question. I was actually thinking of when we move and there's an increase in pain, of course we don't want the pain, so we tend to move away from it really quickly. But when we have chronic pain, what happens is when you move and you start to get the first increase in pain that you get is actually it's an overprotective protection response. And so the system is saying, oh, I need to protect you this much, and so it's giving you pain really early. And so what we tend to do is, as soon as that pain increases, we run away. I don't mean like physically run down the street, but we just sort of move away from it. And what we've found is that for most people, we need to find a way to sort of go up and challenge the pain a bit, sort of move to where there's an increase in pain that we know is manageable, and try to do your activity in that small increase in pain. And in time, what you can do is try to reset the nervous system so it isn't quite so agitated, almost like you're trying to desensitize it. And the ideas have somewhat been taken from similarities from some of the phobia and PTSD work, where if every time the pain gets worse, our response is to move away from it, then unfortunately it doesn't allow any improvement. We have to go up there and find a way to challenge it a bit, and in time it'll start to change.
Okay, there's a couple of questions about the parasympathetic response and yoga. Maybe you could talk a bit about that link and maybe begin by explaining, because for some of the patients who are on here who might not be familiar with that.
Right. So hopefully everyone understands the fight-flight system. So the fight-flight system is part of the automatic nervous system processing in our body. And this automatic nervous system processing has two sides. There's the sympathetic, which is the fight-flight, and then there's the parasympathetic, which is the way your nervous system works when you're relaxed and calm. And so people have been trying to study through meditation. Does meditation support or increase or stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system? And there's research to say that yes, it does, that meditation does. I just did another literature search, and I couldn't find anything on yoga, specifically looking at yoga and the parasympathetic or vagus nerve stimulation. So I don't know that there's any research supporting it, although it makes sense from what people tell us they experience when they practice yoga.
Okay, I think that covers a range of questions who are on here, and some of the chronic pain patients are needing to move. So Tanya, do you want to wrap it there?
Yes, absolutely. That's very good. Just a few updates for a few people who have asked questions over the time. The next session will be on Friday from 11 to 12 Pacific time, and that's 2 to 3 Eastern Standard Time. And the subsequent question and answer times will be on Fridays. After that, it'll be the 11th, 18th, and 20. Oh, I just wrote it down. anyways, it's each following Friday all the way through February 1st. And then we'll also be releasing the practice videos each week, and I'll be sending them by email. You'll get them straight into your inbox, so you won't have to hunt around for them too much. It should be pretty straightforward. And if you can't attend any of the sessions, they will all be recorded and they will all be posted, and I will include links to all of the sessions after they've been released, so you should have access to everything even if you're not able to attend live. And I think that's everything. Thank you so much, Neil, for your presentation. I think it was very informative and insightful. And also thank you to everyone who attended today. And this was our biggest webinar so far, so I hope that we were able to at least answer most of the questions that got submitted. And we'll also be going through them to see if there's any big ones that we missed that we can address on our blog. So thank you very much, Neil, and thank you everyone for being here.